I remember my childhood pretty well. It can't be called happy in any way. I grew up frail and sickly. I had a developmental lag until I was 4.5 years old. I did not speak, only uttered incomprehensible sounds. The most vivid memory of my childhood still gives me goosebumps, as it usually happens when a person encounters something that he cannot explain. My mother raised me alone and worked all day, leaving me with my grandmother. According to her, at that time she went to another city and looked after me, of course, Grandma. She was already quite old and could hardly walk. I remember her kind wrinkled face and already faded blue eyes. She wore funny polka dot shawls and flowered robes, and she always smelled like fresh milk or fresh bread. I loved climbing on her lap and listening to her already muffled, but still pleasant voice. She told me a lot of interesting stories, but unfortunately, I didn't remember them, of course. That day, Grandma went to the store and left me to watch TV for a while. I remember that she was gone for a long time, and I was very scared because, like all small children, I was very afraid when adults stayed late. When I started to whimper, Grandma came back, but without any purchases. Although it was hard for her to walk, she never showed it, but when she returned, it was noticeable that she was in great pain. There were tears in her eyes, and I started crying myself, but she began to calm me down, and eventually I fell asleep. The next few days I began to notice oddities, but at that age, of course, I did not connect them with each other. I just noticed that something had changed in her behavior. She hardly spoke to me. Her face was angry and distorted, and also, she began to smell strangely. She regularly cooked porridge for me and put me to bed, but when I wanted to climb on her lap, I was scolded. I remember crying for a long time out of resentment. The smell from her intensified, and even now I shudder. It was such a disgusting fragrance. I remember that my grandmother, with difficulty, drawing out words and coughing terribly, talked to my mother on the phone, saying that everything was fine. And one morning, I woke up and realized that my grandmother was gone. I walked around the house and looked for her, and then I cried for a long time. I had a real tantrum. That was the first time I spoke, and my first word was grandmother. A neighbor, hearing my screeching, persistently rang the doorbell to find out if everything was in order. Apparently, she called my mother. A few hours later, my mother arrived, and I saw confusion and misunderstanding on her face. That day she left me at a neighbor's, and she was gone for a long time. Only in the evening she returned and cried all evening. And then she went sad and dressed only in black. I never saw my grandmother again, but when I grew up, I found out what really happened. It turns out that when Grandma went to the store, she was attacked by a pack of dogs in one of the dark alleys. The feral mutts gnawed her and dragged her behind the garbage cans. It was on the day when her mother returned that the garbage cans were taken out and my grandmother's half-rotted body was found, because it was hot then. My mother claimed that she was in complete shock when she realized that she had talked to Grandma when she was already dead. And after that, my mother went to church for a long time and often took me with her. I do not know how to explain everything that happened, but I'm sure Grandma didn't mean me any harm. Only this terrible cloying smell of rotting human body still does not leave me alone.